Oh, I'm in the zone, man. Yeah. Now tell me who can stop me. I'm in the zone. Competition's none in the league of my own. All about
Oh, man.
I'ma bring it home when it's over with. I'ma be the king of the throne. Now who can stop me? I'm in the zone.
Yeah, today is one of those days. And it's a Monday. There's not a ton of games, but there is a ton of news. And that's what we're going to talk about. This is the Insiders TV Daily Fantasy NBA show. I've got one guest on with me, and that is Mr. Drew Dinkmeyer. And
Hey, everybody.
he hails from Roto Experts. He and Mike Leone do the Daily Fantasy Rundown, and he's filling in for Davis and Grant, who are both traveling. Grant traveling from Vegas. He was there with our own Mr. Tuttle yesterday. Mr. Tuttle finished in the 20, about in middle of the pack. He went with Eli, which was a huge gamble, and he knew that. Didn't pan out for him, but there was a guy that turned $10 into $1 million.
That's incredible. I mean, I saw our buddy Al Seinfeld push that tweet out last night that it was a single bullet $10 qualifier entry that turned into $1 million, and that is an awesome story for the industry. Just a really, really good thing for the industry to be able to, tout that a single entry can compete with all these other, quote unquote pros out there. Really good thing. I was really happy with the way the first half of games yesterday. It looked like it was going to be like a really strange day where you just didn't feel like it was a worthwhile day for a final. But it turned out to be a pretty good day in terms of I thought there was a lot of skill involved in the people who finished near the top, and I think that's a great thing too.
Yeah, that snow blizzard game, I think, is what really kind of caught people off guard. And you had the Reggie Bush slipping news, so it was. It definitely. We were talking about this in the chat because Dan was kind of in and out because he had his lineup set from the very get go. I mean, like Tuesday or Wednesday had it set, and then all of a sudden this news comes out. Lamar Miller was going to be in his lineup. I don't think I'm giving anything away there now since it's over with. But then you had the news about Daniel Thomas being active, and so you're talking about like rearranging, tinkering with your lineup with potentially $1 million on the line. The amount of stress in that, and Drew, you've been you were at the Draft Street event last year,
Yep.
so you know about this. The amount of stress, like leading up to lineup locks, are it's pretty intense.
It's really intense, and you get in your head so much about it. You get in your head about getting in your head. Like as you're making the lineup changes, you're sitting there going, "Am I outthinking myself? Am I going back against my gut instincts?" And it's one of the things I wrote about last week in our opening drive article at My Fantasy Fix for our football subscribers about trying to come up with a set process that you have in place to try to remove some of the emotion from the decision making that happens. And it's really hard to do with that amount of money on the line. And I know Dan has some regrets about a potential change that he could have made or that he was considering that would have been a big difference. But as he said to me on Twitter today, that's probably going to be the case for 99% of the entrants there. It's just the way it goes. So he had a very competitive team. If a couple things would have gone differently, specifically with Victor Cruz, if Eli and Victor could have rekindled what they had last year, that could have been a very, very competitive team. But chips just didn't fall this way. He had another great week on Draft Street, another really good score, and I know that's the final next week. So hopefully he's getting hot at the right time for Draft Street.
Yeah, we were talking about this, Ben and Steve and myself, the other co-founders of Fantasy Insiders, about how Dan has just been killing it on Draft Street, and yesterday really felt like a Draft Street kind of day, just with some of the sneaky plays. We'll see how next week goes, but Dan leading the Fantasy Pros accuracy challenge there, and that's definitely kind of his home turf, as Head Chopper said earlier. So best of luck to him this week. maybe we can get him on for an interview. He just landed and he has to go back to Vegas. It's a tough life, really tough life.
Yeah, that whole thing that when you do this professionally and people are like, "Oh, do you travel much for work?" and you're usually like, "No, not really." And then like this one period of time where if you're fortunate enough, which I know Dan is, I know Chop is, I know CB35 is, there's a lot of guys who had the success across both sites this year, which is really a testament to how much the game is of skill and a testament to how great of a football season those individuals had. I know I tried my heart out to qualify for one of these things, and I think if Draft Street is going to give away a participation ribbon, I probably deserve the biggest one for filling out 10 quality entries a week in the 420 and not being able to qualify. So it's a huge deal of success just to qualify for it. And obviously, when you walk away from that event feeling like you could have done better, it feels like a little bit of a disappointment. But those guys, everyone who's competing at those events has already accomplished something really incredible this year.
Yeah, they were talking about in the chat, CB, who was also a finalist, is in the chat, and then they're also saying that Notorious had a really good qualifier weekend there on Draft Street this weekend.
It is not over for
right.
him, though. Like I wouldn't go celebrating that. I know this is a pet peeve of mine. But he's in good shape, but he has to sweat. I think it's DeMarco Murray under 26 or 27, which is a big number. But it's not out of the question, especially against the Bears' run defense.
Yeah.
I'll be pulling for Notorious. He's one of the top grinders. He's a really good player.
Definitely is not out of the question. What I want to talk about is not. I don't want to crown him prematurely. I want to talk about. They were talking about how he inboxed it, had like 4 or 5 entries, and here's what I am almost guaranteeing what happened without talking to Notorious, because I do this as well. You sign up for the maximum of 10 entries before it even starts, and then sometimes, especially with him having all the basketball stuff, sometimes you just don't have enough time to make 10 separate lineups, and so you're at the last second trying to, and you just export all, and so you have a duplicate entry into a qualifier, which doesn't really make sense unless you get first.
You do that.
So you get the ticket and you get everything else if you end up winning. So yeah, that's kind of how I would almost guess that's how it goes, because sometimes you just don't have enough. That happened to me this week as well, except I didn't win. A brutal day for injuries in the NFL, and also a lot of NBA news yesterday and today. Let's go ahead and jump into that, and then we'll start taking a few calls, see how this works. There might be a little echo when you call in, but that's okay. It should be pretty cool. Some of the news, though, obviously the big news is this Rudy Gay trade to the Kings, and you have Rudy Gay joining the Kings. You have Isaiah Thomas going to start. On the other side, you have Amir Johnson. There's going to be there's just a lot of implications. But tonight, Rudy Gay's not going to be playing, so you have a Rudy Gayless team, as well as the point guard there, and Grievous Vasquez is not going to be playing. So that obviously is the big news. What's your take on that trade?
I think it's a great trade for Sacramento, and I think long-term, if you want to look at the fantasy relevance to it for daily fantasy players, I think it's going to help Isaiah Thomas III quite a bit, because it really frees up minutes. They didn't bring a point guard back in that deal, so that leaves the backup as Ray McCallum. That's not a situation that's going to really threaten Isaiah Thomas III's minutes, so he gets a big boost. For DeMarcus Cousins, I think it's a little bit of a mixed bag. Rudy generates so many shots that it probably will hurt Cousins' scoring average a bit. It might help his rebounding numbers, because he generates a lot of missed shots as well. And as I joked on Twitter earlier, I think just the general volatility around DeMarcus Cousins is going up, because Rudy is not a great teammate to play with, and DeMarcus is not a guy that has a lot of history of being able to hide his emotions when he's frustrated. So that's the one concern for me. I think tonight's a great night to take advantage of him and all Kings, because their roster is really depleted. Just looking at who's available tonight, other than Isaiah Thomas, Ben McLemore, Marcus Thornton, Derek Williams, Travis Outlaw, Jason Thompson, DeMarcus Cousins. that's kind of it. I mean, maybe Jimmer gets some minutes as a backup point guard if they don't like what they're getting from McCallum, but it's going to be a really thin rotation, especially with the bigs. I'm interested to see who they start tonight, whether they treat Derek Williams as a stretch 4 or as a 3. They treat him as a stretch 4, that unlocks Travis Outlaw as a potential value play at small forward, which is a tough spot to fill today. If they play him as a 3, that unlocks Jason Thompson as a value play at power forward, who I think will probably get 30 minutes regardless, just because of how thin their front court is. But I think Sacramento is a good team to target tonight because they're so thin, and those guys are going to have to play a lot of minutes. And the matchup's not bad either. So, I think Sacramento is a good spot tonight.
Yeah. I mean, there's going to be a lot of daily fantasy goodness. DeMarcus Cousins, yeah, I agree. It kind of I was reading a beat writer, the Locked On Sports. He does the Jazz. Actually, he's not a beat writer. I think he's their play-by-play.
He's their play-by-play guy.
So basically he was saying that he was really impressed with DeMarcus finally posting up on the low blocks, and he thought this Rudy Gay trade was not going to be good for DeMarcus's value. And I think that you're going to have good days and bad days. And so it's not like he was already a sure thing on most nights, but he was gravitating towards that.
He was becoming more of one than he ever has been.
Yeah.
So that's the thing that's tough is DeMarcus was becoming more consistent than he's ever been, and now you enter a guy with poor shot selection, and I just think it's going to be a volatile situation. So those first few nights, I'm going to be very leery of DeMarcus Cousins, no matter the price. It's going to be elevated because he's been playing so well. But I joked on Twitter, I think this is your last day that you can take DeMarcus and feel really good about it, probably for the rest of the season.
Yes, and having that good, and with all the value out there, it's almost like you need to take him on pretty much most of the sites. You're going to have to spend on some players with all of the value. There's some more injury stuff that we'll get to. Want to mention though real quick, the show of course is sponsored by DraftDay, and I posted in the chat the link to this week's bracket contest. Troviers, I'm not sure if that's how you say it, but he beat Papa Cub in the championship, and so he wins a T-shirt and the money involved with that. This week, talked to Scott Malwig there at DraftDay. We're going to skip over Thursday's contest, and we're going to Friday will be the semifinals, and I guess Saturday will be the championship. So should be a good time. Make sure you're getting that because it's it's only 16 entries max. All right, let's get on to some more news. There's just so much of it for today. You've got Ed Davis and Tony Allen. Davis not going to be playing tonight for the Grizz. Tony Allen is a game-time decision. And then you have Quincy Pondexter, kind of out of nowhere, going to be out for the season. So the already out without Marc Gasol, I saw that they were going to be trying out some guards, but they're going to be thin tonight, the Grizzlies are.
Yeah, they'll be pretty thin tonight too. And keep an eye on that Tony Allen news, because if he's out, that really leaves a lot of backcourt minutes to be split by Jared Bayless and Mike Miller, who then become potential value plays as well. And I think both have shooting guard eligibility on most sites, which shooting guard and small forward is going to be prime in terms of salary relief tonight, because there's just not a lot of expensive guys that you feel great about at those two positions. So Bayless and Miller would be in play for me if Tony Allen's out. If Tony Allen's in, I'm probably just avoiding that situation altogether. Even though they'll get a handful of extra minutes from Pondexter being out, I think the bigs are really where you want to look. And I posted this stat on Twitter earlier today, but if Vucevic is out again for Orlando, they've been out-rebounded 165 to 108 in the last 3 games without Vucevic. So that's 19 rebounds per game they're getting out-rebounded by the opponent. That's a lot. And Zach Randolph and Costa Koufos are big guys. Orlando just doesn't have size to really match up with them. So I think both those guys would be strong plays. And you're talking about trying to find guys today that are kind of mid-priced that you can get good value on, because you don't want your rosters to be too binary, where it's like really expensive guys and really cheap guys. it adds a lot of volatility to your roster. You want to find an occasional mid-price guy you can fit in there that gives you better upside in terms of a points per dollar ratio. And I think Zach Randolph and Costa Koufos could both be those guys. I know Koufos' price has risen. He's still exceptionally cheap on DraftKings, and I think that's the one place that you probably have to go ahead and plug him in, regardless of whether Vucevic plays or not. But if he doesn't, I mean, you're looking at a lot of rebounds from Memphis.
Yeah, and I mean, even Zebo, his numbers, he's been kind of banged up, but you have to think if Vooch is out, that he is going to have a field day, and because he's been banged up, his price isn't very high on most sites. So,
yeah, and the thing that I was really surprised about with Randolph is that last game against Golden State, they got blown out, and he was still playing deep into the game. And so, if you have any injury concerns about a player whatsoever, and it's one of your starters, and you're down 35 in the fourth, I can't imagine you'd be playing him. So he got up to 34 minutes. I think that was partly because they might want to get his conditioning back after missing a few games. But I think that's a really good sign for his toe and how it feels. If he's going to play 34 minutes in a blowout, you got to feel really good about things. And you mentioned it. Ed Davis is out tonight. That's, they've only got three bigs. They've got those two guys, and then they've got John Lord, who's not really a traditional big. He's kind of somewhere between a stretch forward and a power forward. So I think you can expect 35-plus minutes for Zach Randolph tonight.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, as long as he stays healthy and doesn't hurt anything, knock on wood, then I think he's a good value play. Not too cheap, or not one of those cheap plays that you're not knowing what you're getting. I kind of teased this earlier. DeAndre Jordan possibly is going to be out, leaving the door open for Byron Mullins, even Ryan Hollins. Those guys are really cheap, or just going small with Blake Griffin more. So that will be interesting. The Bobcats, though, without Bismack and Jeff Taylor, I teased this earlier, but on Draft Street, Anthony Tolliver, under 4K. That is the type of play that I love for GPPs, Anthony Tolliver. So I think people will be on him more in the GPPs. You're going to see him 15 to 20% owned, I would say, over there on Draft Street. But obviously, he's going to be a decent start because really no one else. MKG's out, Jeff Taylor's out. He's going to get all the minutes he can handle tonight.
I totally missed that DeAndre Jordan news. You kind of blew my mind. I did not see that at all. So that's good information because you want anybody from the Clippers you can really fit in tonight. They're going against Philadelphia, and the Clippers are a pretty banged up team too. No JJ Redick, no Matt Barnes. If you take out DeAndre Jordan out of the equation too, the front court gets pretty thin. So Blake Griffin was already on my radar, but if DeAndre Jordan's out, Byron Mullins, I wouldn't be afraid to pick on him in that matchup either. Even though he's a very frustrating real-life NBA player, from a fantasy perspective, he can fill it up. And an up-tempo game that becomes like a shooting contest, that's Byron Mullins' dream.
I was just thinking about Byron Mullins versus Halls.
It's Halls? Yeah. Oh, my God. Those two are going to turn it into a three-point shooting contest.
That's gonna be a fun one for sure. But, yeah, keep an eye on that. Like you said, Blake Griffin, as far as expensive options go, he's going to be a good option. Ty Lawson probably going to be out tonight, so it opens the door up for Nate Robinson and Andre Miller to start. But you have John Wall on the opposite end. Your thoughts on Lawson and this basically going up against Wall? Does this increase Wall's value in your mind?
No, you know what? I think not a lot of attention is being paid to this. But if you take out Nene and Martell Webster and you replace them with Chris Singleton and Trevor Booker, that's going to hurt John Wall's assist totals. Like I don't care who he's playing, who's covering him. And Andre Miller and Nate Robinson are not good defensive players. So on paper, the matchup looks very, very appetizing for Wall, but who's going to make shots for them is the big thing. And Booker's more like kind of a hustle guy. In transition, he can do some work. Singleton can't shoot worth a lick, is only going to really score, again, in transition. So maybe Wall's able to do it by playing kind of fast, and maybe he can make up for it that way. But I'd just rather spend on Chris Paul if I'm going to spend a point guard. I know what I'm getting with Chris Paul. I know the matchup's just as tasty, if not better, against Philadelphia. And with the Clippers, I think they've lost 3 or 4. That's a situation where I think Doc Rivers is going to lean on the starters even more heavily on the road than traditionally. So Wall is a guy that just isn't really on my radar today, and that doesn't mean I don't think he'll do well. I just think relative to price, I'd rather have Chris Paul.
Yeah, Chris Paul is with that pace. I think is going to obviously the one thing you have to worry about is the blowout factor there. But the good thing is that they are playing in Philadelphia and not at home. So like we talked about earlier, that helps things. And Tony Roten for the Sixers going up against Chris Paul will definitely be fun because Michael Carter Williams is going to be out again tonight. I mean, there are just so much injury news tonight that there are a million different ways that you can go with things, and so that's what really makes nights like tonight fun. Make nights like tonight fun.
Yeah, it should be a lot of fun because you can only fit so many value plays into a lineup. And when there's more value plays than the number of spots you're given, then it becomes a distinction between the best players in terms of lineup building and understanding which of those value plays matter most. So I think these types of nights are really fun. I'm kind of the type of person who would rather it either be a situation where there's no injuries or lots of injuries. Because anything in between, like when there's only 1 or 2 really obvious value plays, it just shortens the field that people are playing against, and there's tons of overlap, which is, I think, the signal that you're giving me there.
It was.
Good. We'll be great for the charades party at Christmas time. But yeah, there's just more overlap when there's only 1 or 2 obvious value plays. And tonight, when there's tons of potential value plays, I think that's a better night for players who do their research.
Especially on sites where players are there's basically what we call MPE, multi-position eligibility. So where you're not locked into a certain position, you can go definitely a bunch of different ways, which includes DraftDay, our sponsor. You do have locked-in positions, but you've got players that can fit into either of those positions. So it's fun. Chris Paul is a guy that I'm definitely rostering over there on DraftDay. I think for where his price is, you have to get him in there. Trevor Booker, and that you talked about the Nene and Martell Webster news. Trevor Booker is going to be an interesting play across different sites that are minimum salary like he is on DraftDay. He's a guy that hasn't been happy with his playing time and is going to be out to prove something. So that's another guy that I'm looking at tonight.
He's probably my favorite option of the cheap plays, of the value plays, because I think he's the safest of the group because he actually has legitimate NBA skills. When you look at his fantasy points per minute, and I was doing this on Star Street because our featured site today for power forwards was Star Street, so they don't have any negatives except turnovers, but he averaged 0.78 fantasy points per minute on Star Street for his career average. And that's really about the threshold that most NBA regulars operate around 0.75 to 0.85. Really elite players can be 1+, but they're really rare, like John Henson types. And usually they're lower minute guys because it's harder to maintain that production deeper into the game. But Booker is a guy, the minutes are going to be there. He played 29 minutes off the bench. Granted, it was an overtime game, but that was the game that Nene got hurt in early. So I think he's a good bet for 32 to 36 tonight. Maybe he splits a little bit with your boy Jan Vesely, but I don't think a ton. So I think Booker's a good combination of skill and security in his role, and his price, bare minimum across the industry. Of the value plays that you're looking at today, he's probably one of the ones that I'm most likely to lock in on all my lineups.
I love watching Jan Vesely play, not necessarily playing him on daily fantasy sites, but he's just so fun to watch. He's fairly athletic. There's just not a lot he can do. Let's take a call though. Who wants to be the first caller? This is not toll free. You might hear a little bit of an echo, so it's a little bit we're getting there. We'll get a little bit of a mixer, but someone call in 323-282-FITV. Someone be the first caller, please. I really want to take a call on the show, and you don't have to give your size and your weight like you do on other shows. But let's see if we can get someone to call in. The problem is a lot of people are at their jobs. A few questions, though, in the chat. You prefer Booker over Derek Williams. Definitely interesting where Williams is going to get some playing time. And you said on efficiency sites you do. And
yeah, I mean, Derek's just, he's a guy who doesn't shoot for a high percentage, so there are negatives with him, and he's not a guy that really fills up the stat sheet in a lot of other places other than points. Booker's gonna make a run at double-double tonight. Like he rebounds really well, he runs the floor really well. He averages 0.78 steals per game and 0.8 blocks per game, if I'm going off memory there, for his career around 19 minutes. So I mean, if you're looking at almost a steal and a block. And again, with the way Washington likes to push the pace, I think it's a good situation for Booker, who is a hustle guy and energy guy, to get a lot of potential cheap buckets as well. So I definitely like him on efficiency sides. The other thing is he's generally cheaper than Derek Williams on most sites by a magnitude of 3 to 4%. On some sites it's smaller, but I would say on efficiency sites I feel strongly about it. On non-efficiency sites I think it's a little bit closer.
Fair enough. Yeah, I mean, those Kings are going to be fun. Like you said, there are just so many different options. Shelly86 says, could you play Booker and Singleton on DraftKings?
Yeah, I think that's a viable strategy. The small forward position is going to be a disaster. So anybody at small forward that you can plug in for minimum salary where Singleton qualifies, you have to consider, just because you're going to want to spend at other positions. You're going to want to spend at point guard in bigs tonight. So I think that's a viable play. Singleton's game is a little bit more suited to, which is weird because he's not a good shooter, but it's a little bit more suited to efficiency sites simply because he does a lot of his work in the hustle categories. He doesn't really score a ton. So for a minimum salary, small forward, yeah. But on sites where they just have like forward, I'm a little bit less intrigued.
Yeah, and on, like you said, small forward, typically you can have small forward, you can go both ways of being a shooting guard small forward or a small forward power forward. Tonight is the night that I definitely prefer the power forward in that small forward spot. Actually, that's most nights. Who are we kidding? I'm not a big shooting guard in the small forward spot. I just never have been a big fan. Thoughts on Ariza tonight? Does he get more shots than he normally takes?
Yeah, I think so. The challenge with Ariza is the price. He's a little bit expensive because he went nuts one of the games last week. I had him that night on FanDuel, and I was shocked when I came. I think it was Friday night when I came back, and he had put up a really, really big score. So his price is a little bit elevated, but again, the options at small forward aren't great. So if you don't want to go minimum salary guy, I think he's one of the guys to consider there today.
Let's go ahead and look at the pick 5 today, and let me bring that up. On DraftDay, you can go to the on our website. You can go and vote for who you like the best. But on DraftDay, you go to the games and then click on Rapid Fire, and that's where you want to pick 3 out of 5 to win. So let's pull this up. Steph Curry versus John Wall.
Man, that's tough. I'm going to go Steph. He's been playing out of control. The matchup's not great because Charlotte's top 5 in defensive efficiency against point guards, and they play a slow pace. But you get the bonus points for the 3-pointers made, and I think that's going to be the deciding factor for me with Steph.
Oh man, I'm just going to go John Wall because it's at.
How are you not going Steph with back in his hometown? I was all ready for the psychological angle.
You're right. It is in North Carolina. You are right. Okay, I'll go Steph. And he might be mad that his little brother is trying out for the Memphis team.
Well, and his dad is an announcer for Charlotte. He's got to put on a show in front of Pops.
Okay, well, you convinced me to play the guy going up against a decent squad on the road with a slow pace versus the guy that's going to have to do more against a fast-paced team at home. So
it's a little counterintuitive.
Fine. I did it. I did it. Spencer Hawes versus Monte Ellis tonight. We haven't talked about that Dallas squad going up against Sacramento, but Monte Ellis is a guy that screwed me on Saturday night. He did just enough in the second half to end the game and to be bad, but not enough to win. That's like the worst thing that can happen. Is when someone starts off good, starts off strong, and then they have just a terrible second half, and then they hit like a game winner so it doesn't go into overtime. So they can't redeem themselves. That was bad. It was really bad.
Yeah.
But we talked about him we talked about Spencer Hawes, especially if DeAndre Jordan doesn't play. Your thoughts on Monte Ellis versus Spencer Hawes? This is an interesting one.
I think that's a really good one by Scott. I think they're almost near equivalence when you look at projections and whatnot. I'll go Hawes. I don't have a strong feeling on it, but I'll go Hawes.
I will go. I'll go Ellis, just to be different.
All right.
But if DeAndre doesn't go, I think you would give the edge to Spencer. I think you would have to do that. This is an interesting one. Kemba Walker versus DeAndre Jordan, who might not play tonight. Freebie for those watching that might want to get on that and take advantage of someone. If that's the case, then all you have to do is get 2 out of 4 right, and you're good to go.
Yeah, although if DeAndre plays, I think I'd play DeAndre.
Wait, we have our first call.
Oh,
here we go. Caller, you're on the line. Hello? They hung up. It was the 313 area code. They must have been shy and hung up. Okay. Damian Lillard versus Mike Conley.
Another one too. Another good one too by Scott. I'm going to go Lillard. I never choose Lillard, so I'll take Lillard.
I'll go Lillard as well. He's been pretty hot lately.
This just could be one of those games for Memphis, especially if Vucevic is out, that Conley might have nice assist totals going inside, but the scoring might be down just because it's so easy for them to get buckets inside. So it might be one of those nights where it's a little bit frustrating to own Mike Conley because he just won't shoot.
Yeah, that Lillard has he's been really fun to watch lately, and going up against Trey Burke, who you call Lillard light, should be a fun matchup. We'll talk about that in a second. Nate Robinson versus Trevor Booker.
Booker for me.
Yeah, I'll go Booker as well.
It's small, but there's an efficiency component to draft day in terms of missed field goals and whatnot, and I think that does hurt Nate Robinson's value.
Especially since Booker is starting, and Nate Robinson will have plenty of minutes, but I think the safe pick is going Booker. So there you go. Yep. That's our draft day rapid fire pick. Just submitted that for $22, and if it hits 3 out of 5, I get $40, $18 profit, enough to pay for the T-shirt. For those entered in the tournament. Let's see if who we got so far in this tournament, in the draft day bracket game. Remember, winner gets a free T-shirt. We have CB35, Davis Maddock, Mook Blaylock. This is a new one.
Mookie.
Love Mookie. Nick Carbo, Papa Cub, Fish Nerd, Soccer Dave, TM Boars, Trovure, and Versatile. So still 6 spots left. Get in there while you can. I'll tweet the link out later. So make sure you're getting in on that. We have another question. Paul and Dirk or Blake and Tony Roten?
Dirk or Blake, Tony Roten. I'd go Paul and Dirk. I feel more confident in the high end production of Paul. I'm a little bit surprised that Roten would be priced anywhere close to this group. That would like the pricing of those combinations seems a little off to me. Am I missing something?
Yeah, Nick Carbo, what site is that going to be on? I would probably go with Blake and Roten though. Yeah,
really?
for the upside.
There's a lot of upside.
He says FanDuel. So, and he has money left. Chris Paul.
Yeah, we're all gonna have money left on FanDuel today, probably.
Yeah, and there's probably gonna be a lot of overlap. Chris Paul needs to be in your lineup, but if there's any way to get he and Roten in there, I would try that. But I don't mind a Chris Paul Blake combo.
Well, here's the big decision on FanDuel today. So let's hear Soccer Dave's take. It's going to be Tony Roten or Isaiah Thomas III. Because assuming you're plugging in Chris Paul, that means you have 1 point guard slot left, and Isaiah Thomas III is $500 more than Tony Roten.
I would go Chris Paul.
That wasn't the question.
But that's who I would go.
The question was Tony Roten or Isaiah Thomas III.
I would probably go Thomas. I think he's going to be fun to watch tonight. We have a caller on the line. Caller, who is this?
Hello?
Hello.
May I please speak with Dr. Drew?
Oh boy, that's Papa Cub.
This is Papa Cub on the line, is it not?
I have a relative that has a fantasy addiction.
Tell us about this relative.
Well, we're trying to do an intervention, but they're not picking up our calls.
There's I'm not sure if it was a commercial or if it was a show my wife was watching.
Wait a second.
But what happened was there was this child that was complaining to her mom to stop embarrassing me.
I just wanted to know, why do you guys keep calling me? Can't you get anybody else to call in?
Get anybody to call in who?
How come I can't hear you guys?
I don't know. That might be the problem. You can't hear us at all?
Now I just heard. Okay.
I think he can only hear you.
Yeah, he should be able to hear you, but maybe not. I guess he can't hear Drew. You can't hear your son, can you, Papa Cub?
Well,
when I talk like this, when I'm talking like this, can you hear me?
Now let's try someone else. Is Davis there?
Davis is not here. Papa Cub.
Is Grant there?
No.
I don't want to speak to anyone else. Just Davis or Grant.
Oh man, you're trolling us now, Papa Cub. Call. We'll get this set up properly so you can talk to your son later. But call back. It's been good talking to you though. Always a pleasure talking to Papa Cub on there. Oh man.
So as I was saying, my wife was watching the show, and there's this child that says, "Stop embarrassing me, Mom." And the mom's response is, "Get used to it. This is going to happen the rest of your life." And that is the exact quote and moment that just rang through in my ears, as my father called it.
Oh, we could swap stories about I'm pretty wild and crazy, but like when my dad takes it to a whole nother level. When we go to Vanderbilt games together, it's like I'm the father and he's the son. Last time he had a foam sword and was knighting people that he didn't even know in the crowd that weren't even aware they were being knighted. It was bad. But Papa Cub definitely a source of entertainment. We'll definitely make sure next time we can connect those wires so you can actually hear what Dr. Drew is saying on the line. We want to take some more questions, though, and talk about all these injury news. Just to recap, let's just kind of go down the line. I'll say a piece of news, and then you say a piece of news, and we'll see how much we can get. Are you ready, Drew?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Michael Carter-Williams going to be out.
Ed Davis going to be out.
Tony Allen, game time decision.
DeAndre Jordan, game time decision.
Ty Lawson going to be out.
Marvin Williams going to be out.
Derek Favors, game time decision.
Martell Webster, doubtful.
Nene, out.
All of Sacramento that has been traded recently to Toronto is out, as well as the players they acquired in the Toronto deal are all out.
Jeffrey Taylor and Bismack Biyombo, out.
I'm running low. Nerlens Noel, out.
Yeah, this was all me. I mean, I wasn't even looking at the screen. So I'm done too. Really, I'm not sure who else. I think we covered all of it, but still.
Iguodala out still.
Yes, he is. But I mean, still, that goes to show you just how much injury news is out there. So we'll see. Question: Lure or Singleton? I feel like Lure is going to be one of those GPP plays. If you have 10 entries on a site, you can play them in your 9th or 10th entry.
Yeah, I mean, he's a better player than Chris Singleton. And he's a better fantasy player than Chris Singleton on a per-minute basis. The question is, how many minutes is he going to get? He got 30 in the blowout last game. And then some of the box scores before that were without Zach Randolph when he was getting 30. So that's kind of the question. I actually think it's a good one because I don't think they're that far off. But I think Singleton's just way safer with the minutes.
Yeah. I mean, I think Lure, like I said, is one of those. He's one of those GPP plays. I definitely wouldn't use him in a cash lineup. Not saying it won't pay off, but I definitely wouldn't use him in a cash lineup. And I'm not that opposed to using Singleton. Vucevic is the guy that I forgot to mention.
Good one from 4th and 20 in the chat.
Yes, thank you, 4th and 20. Nick25 says, does Taylor and Biyombo being out bump up McRoberts? Yes. Yeah, I mean, I think it does. And also, I mean, it forces Jefferson to play more as much as he can. Even like they're going to be forced to play their big men, basically.
It also helps Ramon Sessions, who a lot of people aren't going to think of as well. But look, so they're really thin at the 3 now. One of the ways to solve that is to shift Gerald Henderson over to the 3. I know they're going to start Anthony Tolliver, but if Anthony Tolliver doesn't play well, he's not necessarily assured minutes because they could go with 2 guards, especially against Golden State. I mean, Clay does a little bit of work in the post, but really not a lot. So you're not really a big threat there to have Sessions getting posted up by Clay. And Gerald Henderson could probably hold his own against Harrison Barnes. So I think Sessions is the guy who's probably flying under the radar and makes for a good tournament play. Obviously not a great value in cash games because he's a point guard. And we've already talked. There's already enough point guard decisions to deal with. But I think, on a site like Draft Street where you can play 4 point guards potentially, and he's only 6K there, I think he's a pretty interesting tournament play.
5,700 on draft day, and he is shooting guard eligible. He's a guy that I was looking at.
That helps. Yeah.
Guy I was looking at earlier. Definitely could be a sexy play. I agree with you as far as bringing Gerald Henderson over to the 3. They did a little bit last game. Whenever Taylor was out, they used Sessions and Gerald Henderson and Kemba. So I think, like you said, especially against Golden State, Harrison Barnes against Gerald Henderson posting up, that would be an interesting matchup. That would be fun to watch for sure. We have a bunch of questions, so we'll get to them. Lure or Jeremy Evans or neither? FanDuel GPP small forward.
Evans' news is really dependent on Derek Favors, and I don't know if we're going to get that before lineups lock or not. So I like Evans a lot if Favors is out. Evans is actually a really good per minute guy as well. The problem is he fouls like crazy, and so that would be a problem against LaMarcus Aldridge. But because of that, I'll say Lore. I think his minutes are more guaranteed. If you get I guess since they're saying GPP, I think Evans has the bigger upside, but it's very dependent on Favors being out. If Favors isn't out, he's not going to have any chance of meeting the upside.
He had a rough first half on Saturday, but then he came back and had a solid second half. I definitely think that as long as Favors is, I mean, if you have two big guys out, he's going to have to play some minutes at that stretch four position.
And they were talking in that game in overtime when I think it was Evans that fouled out. Maybe it was Cantor that fouled out. They were talking about how Richard Jefferson was going to have to play some at the 4. And the way the announcers were talking about that was as if this was literally the worst possible decision that they could make. It was like the one thing that they're trying to avoid most in Utah, in the entire state, was playing Richard Jefferson at the 4. They were talking about it as if it was a crisis situation. Like when as soon as Cantor fouled out, they were like, "Oh no, this is what we've been trying to avoid the whole game." Richard Jefferson, and there was like a minute 30 left in the game, and they were harping on this. So I think that goes to show that if Favors is out, Evans will get quite a bit of minutes.
Yeah, and this was one thing that they were forced to play Jefferson at the 4 last week because you had Evans out with the flu. And I forget who all. I mean, really, they didn't have a 4, and I think Favors was also maybe out as well. But they just didn't have anybody to play that stretch 4. So, and they were forced to use Richard Jefferson. So, definitely Evans needs to be on your radar, especially if we get news before lineups lock. Cousins or Blake on DraftKings?
Cousins. He's priced a little bit cheaper than Blake. It's like 100 cheaper. But Cousins, I think, is a better fantasy player than Blake. And on DraftKings, where you get the bonus for double doubles, I know Blake went on that incredible streak earlier, but I think Cousins is safer for double double than Blake is. So I'll go to Marcus.
Gortat or Hawes?
That's a really good one, and when I wrote the daily fantasy rundown today, I had Hawes pretty strongly ahead of Gortat, but I'm starting to reconsider that. Just looking at some projected minutes with Nene out, I think I'd lean Hawes, but I think it's a lot closer than I originally assumed it would be heading into tonight.
A lot closer than the experts think. Is that what you're saying?
Well, a lot closer than I thought when I first sat down and wrote things today. So I think Hawes is probably the option with more upside, and I think he has a similar floor, maybe slightly lower. So I'm going to lean Hawes, but I think Gortat is probably safer. He operates in a pretty tight range. Gortat does, so I think it depends a little bit on what you're looking for, but I'd probably play Hawes regardless.
Yeah, Hawes is going to be a sexy play for sure. FanDuel small forward, Bateem or a Bateem?
Bateem?
Nicholas Bateem or Trevor Ariza?
Well, for the price, I think Ariza is going to be a better value. He's $500 cheaper. Now, I don't think anybody cares about price on FanDuel because everybody's going to be looking for ways to fill out their budget. And I think Batum, his production, I think, is a little bit safer. I think he has a little bit of a higher floor. But I do think Ariza outscores him tonight, actually. So I'll go Ariza.
Yeah, it just depends on what kind of streak you get Batum in. You and I were noticing on Saturday, the first half, he had like 3 or 4 fantasy points.
Yeah.
And then the third quarter, he just got red hot. He's so streaky sometimes with those 3-pointers. I think Ariza is actually the safer play tonight. Sports is Fixed says, on a night like tonight, I tend to use too many value plays. Could you both give your top 2 value plays tonight for FanDuel?
For FanDuel, okay. Yeah, for me, it's going to be Ben McLemore at shooting guard. Shooting guard's a tough position to fill, and he's just 3,900. And we talked about how the Kings' rotation is probably going to be a bit shorter. He's actually playing one of the positions that they do have some depth, so there's a little bit of risk to his minutes. But whenever he's gotten 30 minutes or more in a game, he's delivered like 25 to 30 plus FanDuel points. And he's only done that 5 times this year in terms of the minutes per game. But I think tonight is a situation that would lend credence to that. And then I would go with my guy, Trevor Booker, at power forward, 3,600. It's power forward, and that's actually one of the positions you might want to spend. So it's not necessarily one that you have to lock in depending on where you're spending across the different positions. But I think on a point per dollar basis or on a multiplier plus a constant basis, I think he's the safest value play across the industry tonight to be worth his salary.
Yeah, I agree with you about shooting guard and McLemore. Usually I wouldn't put him in that spot, but it seems like there are a lot of point guards available tonight, even with Isaiah Thomas. So Booker would definitely be the top one for me. And then I was going to say Isaiah Thomas, but I understand what you're saying about McLemore, so I'll go ahead and use that. Hollis Thompson for minimum salary? Question mark.
He's in the mix with all those other guys. Small forward eligible. So other guys that we're talking about are Chris Singleton, maybe Jeremy Evans, maybe Travis Outlaw, depending on how their starting lineup shakes up. Don't mind Hollis Thompson. He's probably the one of those guys, other than maybe Singleton, that's most guaranteed for 30 plus minutes just with how they've been using him lately. So that doesn't bother me.
Burnt Popsicle says he has $1,200 left on FanDuel. It is okay. Tonight is going to be the night that it's okay to leave $1,000 to $1,500 left on the table if you really like your lineup. Just because there's so much value. Sometimes when you try to maximize those salaries, you end up with a player that you don't like as much, and they don't have as good of a matchup. I mean, they're not projected to have as many points as someone who is cheaper than them. So that's fine by me. Last question, Hawes or Zebo?
Hawes or Zebo? I'd go Hawes. I think Hawes has a bigger upside. Zebo's upside is always a bit limited because it's really just points and rebounds for him. And I think he's going to be fine tonight. But I think Hawes just has the ability to contribute in more categories, and that gives him a little bit bigger upside. And you got to also remember the Clippers, while DeAndre Jordan is oftentimes thought of as a good defender because he blocks a lot of shots, he gets lost defensively a lot because he's going for blocks, and he's not the kind of guy that's going to, even if he plays, he's not the kind of guy that's going to chase Hawes out to the three-point line. So the Clippers rank 29th in defensive efficiency against centers. I think it's a good matchup for Hawes. And then if DeAndre doesn't play, Byron Mullins is terrible defensively. So he might sit out at the three-point line with Hawes, but it's weird to think about a center driving. But Hawes would be able to get past him pretty easily. So I think Hawes is better than Zebo, but I like both players tonight.
Yeah, both are salary. A few more, McLemore, Booker, Nate Robb, or Lure. I think McLemore Booker is the one you want to go for, especially if it's a cash. Derek Williams or Booker. I think we've already covered that with going Booker being the safer play. Insider Fantasy mentioning a Twitter that Rick wrote to STL Cards saying, put it this way, sure hope Gerald got a good night's sleep because he'll be busy. So
yeah, he's going to have to play a boatload of minutes tonight. Now, the matchup is kind of neutral. Golden State's okay against shooting guards defensively, but yeah, he's going to have to play just a ton because as we talked about, he's not only going to have to be there starting two, he's probably going to have to play some of the three as well. And I was guessing that Ramon Sessions would get some time at the two. So I would think Gerald Henderson is one of the better bets for 40 minutes tonight.
Yeah, he's going to get all the minutes that he can handle. I think that was kind of a foregone conclusion, but I guess STL Cards asked questions and the beat writer for the Bobcats answered. If you haven't already, go take a look on DraftDay.com. Scott Malwig does a great piece the day before tomorrow. Click on strategy, and you can see some of his plays. He's got Chris Paul and John Wall there at the top. Love Steph Curry. I do too, especially in that shooting guard spot. And now that, Drew, you brought up that point about him playing in his home state. Duke passed him over, so he always wants to show out in his home state. That should be fun. He also has LaMarcus Aldridge, who we didn't really talk about. And then Spencer Hawes, Jefferson, and Costa Koufos, who we did talk about. So go check out the article. It's got some value plays also. And speaking of Scott, he's in the chat, and he says, saw Clay might be on Kimba tonight. We'll leave Curry on either Tolliver or Henderson. If that happens, then you have to bump up Henderson or Tolliver. Like I said, Tolliver had a decent play on Draft Street. Drew?
Yeah, that would have to be on Henderson. I can't imagine. I mean, Tolliver doesn't have a post-up game, so maybe you can hide him on Tolliver, but that would leave Barnes on Henderson. Yeah, I mean, maybe they could do that. Yeah, I could see that. Sorry, I was walking through that on the air.
I mean, walk it out. That's what we like to say. Tell people where they can travel to see your content that you put out there for Roto Experts.
Yeah, our stuff is over at rotoexperts.com. You go to the daily tab, and you'll see the daily fantasy rundown as an option. It's subscription-based, but our content is every single day, and we've got 2 different packages, which you can also bundle. We've got a full scouting reports analysis, 2 to 5,000 word article, depending on how many games there are on a given night, breaking down each position, value plays across the industry, top plays, who the guys to spend your money on. It gives a good insight into how we think about roster building as well. And then we also have a cheat sheets package that focuses on FanDuel, DraftKings, and Draft Street. Highlights tournament plays, value plays that you can use there. Both packages come with our lineup alerts that we keep you updated with emails directly to your inbox as news breaks, with not only who's in and who's out, but the analysis that's associated with it. And for those that are considering perhaps purchasing our package, just to give you guys at Fantasy Insiders and Insiders TV a little bit of a heads up, we're going to have a price reduction on the 15th of December for the season-long packages. So if you're considering signing up for the season-long with us for the rest of the year, we are going to have a price reduction starting on the 15th.
Interesting. See, I love how you get, because you didn't have to do that, but giving the people a little bit of notice, and not only do you get some great picks, you also get to stare at this guy right here. Look at that pick. I mean, Michael's kind of smiling, but Drew is straight up just GQing that thing. Good stuff. Drew, really appreciate you filling in for us. Grant and Davis are on the road. Davis will be back with us tomorrow on the Daily Fantasy Insiders TV show. It's presented by DraftDay. If you haven't already, go to DraftDay, sign up. Let's see if the tournament has filled up. There are 14 spots, so still 2 spots left. Make sure you get in there because it will fill up, especially as soon as I tweet the link after we get done. So with that being said, thanks for everyone tuning in. Thanks to DraftDay for sponsoring the show. And Drew, thank you for filling in.
Pleasure.
I'm in the zone. Competition's none in a league of my own. All about the W. I'ma bring it home. When it's over with, I'ma be the king of the throne. I'm in the zone. And you can't take me out of that. At the top now, but the bottom's where they found me at. So if I'm down, it's facts. I'm like Dennis Rodman with the rebound when it come to bouncing back. It's like the Bulls is at the draft and I'm 23. I'm Mike with it. I feel bad for who checking me. Passed in ahead of B, that you can never be. All about the W, like after the letter V. They say they win, but I ain't heard of them cats. And since we talk,
You can tell this video is a little old.
That is deep.
Oh, man, Monte and Steph. Those were good times. All right, guys, we'll catch you later. Stick around in the chat. Find us on Twitter, and we'll get back to you. Later.